Hello, hello. We
Hello,
got
everybody.
two people watching. Hi. Well, guys, we got Jeff Davis with us today, and we're so excited to have him. But
But you know
Jonathan,
who we haven't got? We won't be having Vivian because she's moonlighting. She's going off somewhere else like a dirty stop out.
I know.
Hi, Nettie.
Hi, Nettie. So, Jeff, you might wonder why Jeff is in his car. It's because of signal, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, I am. There's a whole joke about disgruntled veterans and antisocial behavior, which is pretty much true. Where I plunked myself down to build my house some years ago is out in the woods, in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains, on the edge of Bigfoot country, and and civilization is still only gradually creeping in, and so my internet bandwidth is so low that I have to actually leave the mountain in order to get enough bandwidth for video broadcast. So I'm sitting in my car in the Walmart parking lot with my Walmart cookies. They're yummy.
Now we have another member of the team who's trying to join us. Come on, Archie. Come on. My silly little dog is trying to jump off on my knee and refuse. Come on, Pig. Come on, little boy. Oh, bloody hell. Excuse me for a moment. Come on, dog.
I like the way he calls his dog Pig.
Well, he's Archie Pig because he isn't very big. Come on, Arch.
Is he more of a barking cat?
No, he's gorgeous. He's very old. He's 17 years old, this dog.
Wow.
Oh, come here, you stupid animal. Oh.
Well, I must say, Jeff and I have known each other for a number of years now. And
5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just seemed to sort of hit it off when we first met. It was just somebody I could talk to quite easily and learn from. And he's I haven't told him this, so don't get a big head, Jeff. He's actually given me advice, and I've taken it. It's been really good advice. And he's a great friend. He's also a brilliant author. I have one of your books here, the Haunted Vancouver one, and Haunted Astoria.
Astoria, yeah.
Yes. I went to Astoria. I went over there and spent some time with William Becker, and we went round to all of these places. But I must say to you guys, before we came on air, we were talking about bears and things like that in the woods over there. And I went to a place not far from Astoria called Fort Stevens. And I walked around Fort Stevens, had a wonderful time, but it was only when I was coming out, there was a big sign saying, "Please be aware of the cougar." And I thought, damn, if I'd known they had cougars around it, I'd try and look out for them. I'd want to see one, you know.
Yeah. Everybody says that until they actually do.
Well, it's just big soft pussycats.
If you say so. They are nature's killing machines.
But don't they don't bother you unless you're literally bothering them. They're that unless they've got babies.
Ideally, but surprise them. Surprise any animal. Surprise a human being. Then they go on that whole instinctive flight, fight, or freeze, and that's usually what happens if people are attacked by a big animal, cougar, bear. It's because they surprise them, and then by the time that they're surprised, you're within their personal space, so they think you're attacking them. Looking them directly in the eye, that's a challenge. Even try that with small dogs. just stare at them, and they get all antsy about that.
I have staring competitions with the cat. And I
Beth,
must say, I
Beth did
win.
with my cat,
Fine.
yeah. Well, and Beth lost.
Did he?
Yeah.
We should
My
have
cat.
a little thing where we get people to stare their pets in the eye and see who looks away first, and film them, and put them on just smother Facebook with them. It would be just a great thing to do, I think, just a bit of fun.
I think, you see some of those Facebook reels, especially where the cats are jumping sideways and arching their backs. I think it's because they're being stared at.
Oh dear. Well, I'm going to be buggering off in about 4 minutes' time.
Will you
So
be joining us again later, or?
If you're still around, I'll jump back on. But I'm off to do, and I'll be totally honest. I'm being interviewed for another show, so I know I double booked. It's very naughty of me. I didn't even realise I double booked. I got the months wrong. So
yeah, well, you remember a couple of weeks ago I interviewed you for my podcast, and it was 2 parts because we talked so much, and it was going to air this past Sunday, a couple days ago, and they had some kind of server problem, and somehow they were airing an archive episode. So it'll be 2 more Sundays before our chat reaches my podcast.
we went on for so long; it would have been in 2 parts.
It was. We were just getting to your membership with the Fortean Society when had to chop it.
Yeah. But we will catch up soon anyway, Jeff, because we got lots to plan for next year and sort out, and
I'm gonna take Vivian and her friends out into the woods, and then I'm gonna abandon them with nothing but a compass, a canteen of water, and my good wishes.
That'll serve her right.
We'll see who eats who first.
We're going into the woods, Jeff and I, and we are going to have protection.
That's right.
Hi,
what kind of protection?
Chantal.
We'll leave that to everybody's imagination.
Yeah. So I'm going to leave you in the good hands of Jonathan. And if you're still on when I finish, I will be back. But Jonathan is going to probe you, Jeff, because he doesn't really know too much, well, other than what I've told him and what he's seen. So it will make for a good conversation, I think.
Okay.
So I'm going to probe the poor man.
Metaphorically, yes. I hope.
Yeah, I hope it's metaphorically.
I don't know what else you...
Vivian, but not that.
Nico, not that kind of protection. We were talking about bear spray, maybe a gun or whatever we need to take with us.
But Nico did get my cougar joke, which went completely over your head.
Oh, so bum.
Yes, went completely over your head, Vivian.
Listen, I can't cougarize anyone because I'm too old and knackered, and I can't be bothered to show somebody what to do. If they don't know, then see you later, mate. So there you go.
You're old and knackered. You're about 15 years younger than I am.
I was going to try and get Nettie to come and help, but she's in bed with the flu. So can we all wish Nettie get some good vibes?
Well,
she said she's like a snowball. Wow. I bet she's dripping like from her nose. Her nose is running and all sorts.
What a great mental picture. I hope you're better soon.
Yes, Vivian, you're such a wordsmith. You conjure up such delightful images.
Yes, snot trails and all sorts, tissues everywhere, and a bottle of brandy next to her. I don't blame her. Right, I'm off, guys. So have a wonderful show, and I will speak to you guys later.
All right.
We
We'll talk
certainly
later.
shall.
Right.
Okay, go away. Come on, go.
And she's
Now
gone.
we've got rid of her. So,
Yeah, now it's time to talk about Vivian. All of our
yes, of
complaints.
course. She's still there listening, you know.
Oh, no.
No, she's gone now. Now, let me see if I can get rid of... Oh, hi, Dave. Dave Scott has just joined us, which is quite interesting because he is one of your counterparts in Canada, and he's been researching the mysterious events in the Nahanni Valley, which I know have certain similarities with the things that you guys are talking about on Alaskan Killer Bigfoot.
Okay.
So, for those of us like me who don't have a television set, can you tell us about Alaskan Killer Bigfoot? And Archie, you can get up on my lap in a minute.
Oh, sure. The as a television production, we only got one season in for various reasons. Mostly, like a lot of people's lives, even as we're living lives now, COVID still looms in the backdrop for me as changing my world. So, working on Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, the show was filmed at the beginnings of the COVID epidemic, and then it aired kind of toward the end of COVID. So we got 8 episodes in our first season, and with the economic things that went wrong afterward, the show was never renewed. But it within people who are into cryptozoology, particularly Bigfoot, there are really two major viewpoints in camps. One is this almost idealized view that Bigfoot is, as I've said many times, a cute, cuddly Ewok on steroids. Big, friendly, Harry and the Hendersons, wouldn't hurt a fly. And the other is that Bigfoot has much more of an instinctive, um, animalistic nature, which includes can be violent. Not always, but it can be. So on the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska, there is a town site known as Portlock. Also, it had double names, Port Chatham. And the area had been occupied prehistorically by native peoples only sporadically. There would be people living there extended time, almost village life for decades, maybe even centuries. I don't have the radiocarbon dates, but then there would be these periods when they abandoned the site, and then they would come back decades, if not centuries later. And what ended up happening is many European explorers actually stopped. They on the site of what's now Portlock. We have their journals and their map coordinates and their soundings when they stopped. One of the explorers was Nathaniel Portlock, who was a colonial English ship captain who had been one of Captain Cook's subordinates. And each of the expeditions, when they stopped there, they performed the land taking ceremonies, and oftentimes bad things happened. For instance, when the Spaniards landed the next day after their ceremony, they had 8 sailors die, according to the logs of scurvy. But it was like an overnight thing, and later on, it became by about 1900, it became a fishing enterprise. There was a cannery and a small fishing fleet. And over the next couple of decades into World War II, they had up to 100 seasonal employees living there, mostly native people with their families. So there was a school, there was a church, there was a post office. But also by the 1940s, various things started going wrong. At one point, the early cannery operation, it burned to the ground. They had to rebuild it. And during World War II, there was an expansion for the war effort. And especially in those years, they had cannery workers on their day off would go hunting for moose or bear, or I think maybe if they had elk up there. And several of them disappeared. Up to 2 dozen of them went up. Their remains were never ever found, or in a couple of cases, they actually found their body washed into the lagoon by snow melt and rains. And in 1949, it reached a head where the native people believed that there was a spirit being Nantinak that, by the descriptions, is kind of like a Bigfoot, only prone to violence with supernatural powers. But the logs were rolling down the hillside and hitting houses, and everybody was so afraid that virtually overnight they abandoned the town. And it took a couple days for the postmaster to leave, and every now and then people, descendants of the original factory worker, will visit, but only for short trips. Now the land is still owned by the tribal corporation, and they and this is where the television crew uh, got in touch with some of the native folk, and they said, we want to see whether or not we can we can go back, and is it safe, and will it be productive if we reopen fishing operations. And so that was kind of the beginnings of this. And the Bigfoot interaction was not planned, and they thought, well, this will be something that they have to look into, but they were more concerned at first with what's it like going back and exploring 70 years later your ancestral homeland. And within the first day of them landing and setting up, they had knocks coming out of the woods and cries and things like that. And that's the premise behind Alaskan Killer Bigfoot.
Golly. And you were part of this.
I was. I did not go out to Portlock. It was. I was contacted by the producer to do background history because these are real historic events. So I kind of worked with them. He had other people in his production staff doing some of the history, but I I met him. The producer is a guy named Brian Niffel, and I met him. He worked on the show The Dead Files, and I oftentimes appear on these kind of television shows because I am a historian, and I have a master's in archaeology, University of Sheffield. Go knife makers. I don't even know if I'm sorry if the University of Sheffield ever had a mascot or not, but um, and a bachelor's in anthropology, and I work for a number of years as an archaeologist in the Washington and Oregon Cascade Mountains, which is prime Bigfoot country.
Mm.
So I also am a military historian, and so in particular these voyages of discovery from the Spaniards, the English and American explorers is all part of what I do anyway. So I flew up and made a couple of visits where I talked in my role as historian to two of the members who are cast members, which were Ash and Keith. I actually never met DJ. Vivian and I know DJ, and and I didn't meet DJ live until I had to go to England earlier this year to meet him. See, I see the question from D. The question, do you think Bigfoot inhabit the area regularly, or are they drawn by human activity? This is all speculation, but based on analogy from wild critters and primates and even human beings, particularly in a foraging type of lifestyle, humans, primates, and so on, you have a territory that you consider yours, and oftentimes you'll make a circle around it because you have to go into a certain area, gather gather roots, berries, animals, and then you deplete that resource temporarily. So you go to another area for other resources, and you make a big circle. So right there is a good harbor. So I can see humans and primates making this circle and coming back to what we know as Portlock because of its proximity to kind of safer waters. Maybe they fish too, salmon runs and so on.
What you're describing about the historic events which led to Portlock being abandoned sounds very much like some of the stories of the Wendigo.
Yeah, they do. And you're not the first to ask this as a comparison because according to the ethnographies, that is, anthropologists and people from different cultures visit another group of people and ask them questions and write down their responses and stories and
Mm,
traditions. So, according to a lot of the ethnographies of people living in the Pacific Northwest and then also the Pacific coast from what's now Washington, Oregon, up through Canada into Alaska, they talk about how some of these, I will just use the word Bigfoot, some of these critters have the ability to change their voices to sound like different animals, mostly like bird song and other animals, and that their voices have the ability to hypnotize people and lure them outside, like a Pied Piper of Hamelin kind of a thing. And Wendigo is more famous, I guess, for its ability to mimic human voices and
mm,
directly eat human flesh. So the bodies, and I don't have photographs and autopsies. Anecdotally, they talk about the people who were killed from Portlock. The Based on the description, they never ever mentioned them being eaten on or off of. They're horribly mutilated, but the people who found the bodies didn't say it looks like somebody ripped off their legs and chewed on them and had teeth marks. And an absence of this story doesn't mean it's not true, but so there are some differences, I think, between Nantinac's behavior and a Wendigo. And I think Wendigo, as far as where the traditions talking about them, that's more Western Canada as
mm.
opposed to Eastern Canada and Alaska. Some people can cross-check me. How many do I think are living today? I don't know. I believe here in my area in the Pacific Northwest, uh, prior to the American settlers arriving in the 1840s, and especially after the Transcontinental Railroad in the 1860s, where tens and thousands of people a year were coming across, there would have been much more habitat for a Bigfoot type species. But when I was working for the Forest Service, I would have to do archaeology surveys. So I would leave my office in a Forest Service truck, and then I would drive to the blacktop roads ended, the macadam, and then I would drive on gravel roads until that road ended, and then I would get out of my rig, and I would have to frequently land navigate, maybe even another hour into the mountains, where they said we're going to cut down trees in the future. It was a lot of this was old growth forest, and I would still, because of hunters and such, I would still find occasional candy wrappers and cigarette butts in some of these locations. So at least in the Cascade Mountains where I worked, uh, it is possible to coexist if humans are only there occasionally, but uh, at hunting season and so on, just that encroachment. Uh, so I think there are some areas in the Northwest that don't have any Bigfoot now that 100 years ago could have sustained that kind of a primate population. And then when you get a certain low level of of population, then inbreeding and recessive characteristics and things that sometimes a population gets so low there's no recovery. So that might well be in the future.
If we can backpedal a little bit, you were saying that of some of the bodies that were recovered back, and this would be in the 30s and 40s,
40s. Yeah.
that they were horribly mutilated. At the risk of being prurient, and I've got doing this with my zoologist hat on, not with a tabloid journalist hat on. What sort of mutilation?
Um, that I don't know. They were not specific. This is coming from newspaper accounts and the graphic detail about something like that in 1930s and into the 1940s was not there. Uh, and I'm guessing there were no autopsies. Having told you that, the local people were somebody killed by a bear and then mauled by it. The local population would have known what that looked like.
Mm.
So again, inferring 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 things based on what was not said rather than what was said, horribly mutilated in a way that the wild animals that they knew about probably didn't do it, because it would not have been quite so mysterious if somebody's body had they'd found somebody's body and they had been chewed on and clawed by a bear. It would have been a horrible tragedy, but it would not have been the subject of mystery.
There are an awful lot of animals, though, that live in those forests that would do secondary predation upon the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Even, you know, I discovered this the other day. One of the things that does the most damage to dead bodies is porcupines,
Yeah, I have
because
no doubt.
porcupines chew away at the limbs to get at the bones. And I had no idea of this. I only learned this a few weeks ago. But there are an awful lot of animals there, like porcupines, like fishes, like
Well, a
like
lot of
skunks,
rodents.
like foxes, lots of animals which will secondarily predate upon dead bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. They want the calcium.
Mm.
Squirrels, even
Yes,
squirrels will eat birds, not for the protein of their meat, but because of the calcium
and
and other
even
minerals.
deer will eat ground nesting birds purely for the calcium and the salt content.
Hmm. Now, one man was packing to go hunting, and he was attacked by something, and his hunting dogs chased away the critter, and he was still alive for a very brief time when his friends found him wounded, and it was his claim that this giant hairy figure critter came out of the woods and attacked him, and his dogs chased it away. Otherwise, it would have finished killing him and maybe dragged his body away. So that is one of the stories, and again, in an area where everybody a couple times in their life comes across a bear, and up in Alaska many times in their lives people are confronted by bears. They know
Mm.
what a bear looks like. So confusing a bear with a human being. I, I have bear on my property every now and then, and when a bear is standing on its hind legs, and people, I've known hunters when they're skinning a bear, and so when a bear doesn't have its skin on and all of its fur, if you lay it out, aside from its head and jaws and its claws itself, they very much resemble a human being from a distance of
Mm.
15 or 20 feet or 50 feet, minus their skin.
And this would be Ursus americanus, wouldn't it? North
Black
American
bear.
black bear. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, the American black bear we were talking offline is about In our area they can top out 200, 250 pounds. Um, and then the next step up is the brown bear, and the grizzly, and then the polar bear. Yeah, if a polar bear can get to 11, 12 feet, if you saw a polar bear without its skin, you might well think it was a giant, the bones of a giant.
Yes, very much so. And of course, then there's Kodiak bear, which is bigger than a grizzly, still only a brown bear subspecies, but it's even bigger than a grizzly.
Yeah, and they're thought that they get that big because of the high protein diet on Kodiak Island because of all the salmon they eat. I
Well, that
met
does
a
make sense.
well, I met a wildlife biologist in Arizona, and they have black bear there, and the mature black bear there weighs about 75 to 100 pounds. And I asked him about that separate speciation. He said, no, they're Ursus americanus, but they're on a stressed diet, eking out a living in the desert, and so they're just naturally smaller. I don't know that anybody would want to capture an Arizona black bear and feed it up as an infant bear to see how big it would get, but it's an interesting experiment.
It would be a fascinating experiment. And of course, there were also two subspecies of desert brown bears, weren't there, in historical times? There was one in California and one in Mexico.
Hmm.
And I believe that they both died out in about 100 years ago.
Yeah, well, there were California condor in the Pacific Northwest. Lewis and Clark helped end their existence. They shot one or two of them for trophies, and so the Native American artwork, they talk about a thunderbird, and it was probably condors.
Well, the Pacific Northwest and Alaska have got a whole range of cryptozoological creatures. Like, for example, there's the Lake Iliamna monster in um, Alaska,
Hmm.
which, depending who you read, it's either a giant fish or it's something prehistoric. I personally go with the giant fish, but there's some fascinating stories from there.
Yeah, every year, and Viv and I had talked about this offline earlier. Every year, if somebody wants to Google uh, cryptozoology finds of 2025, cryptozoology finds of 2024, there will be two categories: critters, animals nobody even suspected existed, or we just found a supposedly extinct species in
Mhm.
Indonesia on the islands. So it's, yeah, of course, usually they're smaller animals. Megafauna, we think that they're mostly gone, but I remember, God, this is over 20 years ago, seeing somebody had posted photos online from a hunting trip, and there was a guy kind of kneeling with a rifle in front of a bear, a black bear, no, brown bear, and I was actually feeling sorry for the bear. It had run blood coming out of its snout because it had been killed, and I was thinking this guy must be like 5 foot tall or something. And then they pulled back and had other people standing around it who were normal size, and this grizzly bear, probable grizzly bear, was about as big as a polar bear, and
Wow.
they hunted it, killed it because it was a man eater. And they emptied its stomach, and there was a hiker, was left of a hiker, bits and pieces of him coming out of its stomach. And so they believe that was a short snout bear, or what people might call a cave bear.
Yeah,
And so,
the short-faced bear.
yeah,
There's quite a lot of evidence to suggest that a small population of this short-faced bear still exists in parts of Siberia.
yeah, and or the northern Alaska in Canada. And maybe we don't know about it because they're much better hunters than humans are.
And it's a very isolated place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the population of humans per square mile there is there, but I'm sure it's not very big.
No, not at all. And well, which leads to Vivian was worried about going to Portlock. She intends to go next year, and during the most dangerous time people have from being attacked by bears is when they're first coming out of hibernation because they've lost all this weight and they're really hungry,
Mm.
and they will attack just about any critter that they find because they're that hungry, regardless of the risk. So it's a good thing she's going in later summer.
Yeah, 'cause I would be terribly worried about her, I think, if she was going right at the time when the bears have been asleep for 6 months and they wake up, they're hungry, they're tired, and they're bad tempered. Because I know what I'm like if somebody wakes me up suddenly. I'm bad
Mm-hmm.
enough, and I can imagine what that would be extrapolated to a bear.
Yeah, it would not be Fozzie Bear coming out of the Muppet Cave. No, no, indeed not.
I tell you a cryptid, although it's not really a cryptid, but a sort of cryptid from Alaska that I learnt about very recently. And this makes perfect sense that occasionally Siberian tigers will swim across the Bering Straits and end up occasionally actually in mainland Alaska, which is something very, very, very far out, I think.
Well, at the end of the last ice age, uh, when Alaska and the Bering Sea was a plain, and the Aleutian Islands were mountain and
Mm,
hilltops. There were lions and tigers and uh, mammoths, mastodons, and all those kind of critters on the landscape. And in 1994, there was a press release that on one of these Aleutian Islands, I think in the United States side, that they had come across the remains of, was it mammoths? No, mastodons. And based on the radiocarbon date, they had managed to survive until about 2,000, 2,500 years ago.
mm.
But as the sea levels crept up, they became isolated on what became islands, and then they inbred, and because of the caloric content of their diet, they got smaller and smaller. And then they eventually died out, but they almost made it to the modern age. And one of the explanations in Greek mythology for the Cyclops, the one-eyed giants, is on some of these Greek islands. They found the remains of some of these elephantine critters that themselves had become isolated on what the Aegean, what were mountains and hills, became islands, and they too inbred and were deformed, and then the ancient Greeks, 3,500 years ago, came across their bones and said these must be giants.
I've always been fascinated by the way that isolated populations of animals on either geographically or on islands, either where they've either been in isolated mountain ranges or whatever, or on islands, do tend to be either become dwarfs or giants.
Mm-hmm.
As
Yeah,
island dwarfism is this, it fascinates the hell out of me. That
yeah. And then the question is it caloric content, or is it a maximization of recessive genes, which is what happens with quote inbreeding? And I don't have an answer other than speculation and fascination, like you. But
if I was going to speculate, I would say my bet would be on the be the latter, be the maximization of recessive genes rather than caloric content, but that's purely a guess. That's purely guesswork on my part.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the nice thing about a speculative conversation, which is what we're having, is neither one of us can actually say, no, you're wrong, because we don't know. We're just speculating.
Now, in recent times, have there
Mhm.
been more sightings of Bigfoot, Sasquatch type creatures in that area of Alaska? Do the sightings continue?
Yeah, the sightings continue. And see, to native people, these are not, these are like everyday, if not occurrences, they're part of their worldview. The belief in these critters, these beings, and I'm going to give you a very broad, kind of an overview of kind of a general spiritual supernatural worldview, shared by a lot of these peoples, but it's very broad, and I guarantee you somebody who is who's living in academia will come up with exceptions that say no, that's not true in this case. But as a worldview, there's a belief in animism. That is, every single object has its own living spirit and
Mhm.
intelligence, some more intelligent than others. Rocks, trees. You build something, and it also has animism in it, within it. And some things are smarter than others, some things are more magical than others. And there are mobile, living biological beings. Now, there's also a belief that the earth has gone through various ages, and so the world as it existed, it changes, and there's a massive reorganization of the world, and oftentimes supernatural beings we would call gods from one age of the world to the next will still exist or may still exist, but their powers and shapes are changed, where gods themselves, in the change of the world, now become rocks or landforms, but they still retain some of their supernatural powers. In the Pacific Northwest, my area, the word is a skookum. A skookum is a powerful supernatural being. And elliptilicum, if I apologize for starting to introduce this stuff, but an elliptilicum is someone that was godlike that has now changed into a different format and probably turned into a skookum. So Bigfoot are skookums because they're powerful kind of supernatural beings, but not all skookum are Bigfoot, because there are many others. And this may sound familiar in the UK, where there are various stone formations and circles and things like that called, the Nine Witches or the Five Sisters.
Mhm.
And there's a belief that animistically that they have their own power, fairy circles, things like that. So all this stuff, even amongst Christians, it's still part of the belief system. You can be a Christian and still have a belief that the old religions got some of it true, didn't they? And
Yeah,
uh,
and
and mhm.
it never said anywhere in the Bible. And I have my brother is a priest, and I always have arguments with him about this. But in the Bible, it says, "Thou shalt not have any more gods before me." It doesn't say that he was the only God. It
Mhm.
doesn't say Yahweh is the only God. It just said, "Don't worship any of the others."
Yeah,
And
and it
so the
talks.
idea of there
Mhm.
being pre-Christian gods and goddesses around makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and mixed in with that, there are behemoths mentioned
Mhm.
in the Bible. And so, and this kind of alludes to Kelly's question, which I'm reading. I can't get my head around how all the technology we have, we do not have more evidence. And absolutely, and this is another one of these big among Bigfoot cryptozoologists, is there's a guy named Grover Krantz who has since passed on, and his articulated skeleton is now at the Smithsonian, by the way, along with his Irish
together with
wolfhound.
his dog. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and anyway, Krantz is the one who said, "Listen, you want to be taken seriously. You need a body. You need a body. You need a body for everybody to see. You need it on display. You need autopsies. It has to be seen, just like the alien autopsy videos.
Hmm.
Was it real? Was it fake? Well, we don't have the body, and people are still arguing about that. And so that was Kranz's supposition was or statement was, I he wasn't morally saying you need to go out and kill one. He just made a statement that everyone will believe it if you have a body that everybody can see. The motto of Missouri is called the show me state. So you can say anything you want, but you have to show me before I believe it.
Hmm.
Now, I got into a little bit of a discussion, not a disagreement, because somebody was saying, "Well, I'm a genetics expert, and so all we really need is a blood sample or a skin or hair sample, and we can get the genetic evidence from that." And I said, "Yes, you can, but if your aim is to prove it to everybody, you need a body." Because
Yeah.
some people are not going to trust your lab. Hold up a sheet of lab paper. I got a piece of paper that says this is a Bigfoot. And, and he disagreed with me about whether it was necessary, but he also agreed, yeah, it's most people would not accept it unless we had that. So,
And
hmm?
a lot of this stuff is deeply ingrained within the human psyche. And you get the same stories repeated all the way around the world, which is something I find fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there is a story that I first heard about from Sri Lanka, or back when it was the British Protectorate of Ceylon, back 150 years ago. That there was a story that there was a tribe of very, very primitive people who used to live in this cave and used to come out and raid the local farms at night. And the local farmers got so fed up with this, they forced them all into this cave and then smoked them to death. Basically, burnt big fires outside the cave, so the whole population were killed. And that story has spread to two different places in Indonesia. It's happened on Flores and on Sumatra. And it's happened at least one place in Canada, and I believe one place in the States, and in Guyana in South America. The same story of disgruntled tribesmen killing the whole population of a primitive relict tribe in exactly the same way. That story has spread all the way around the world. And it fascinates me the way that all sorts of stories like this are an ingrained part of the human psyche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and oh gosh, I cannot remember. The various anthropologists in the late 18 to 1920s or 30s talking about the enduring power of myth and how mythology various parts of the world are very similar, if not the actual details of the who and the who, but the what and where, as far as how people deal with problems. And then is it just something that's more natural that is environmentally influenced? For instance, if you have a group of people who don't have guns and you have this overwhelming enemy who's much stronger than you, that you're coming at them with spears and they have spears too, but they're still stronger with you, how are you going to get rid of them? And so independent independent action or invention from one part of the world to the next fills the details of the story. That's off on one side. Or did it really happen in your part of the world, and did stories get spread by things like Christian missionaries bringing the Great Flood mystery,
Mm.
where various, yes, indeed, most cultures of the world talk about floods, but are those stories? Do those stories? If the anthropologists visited there first, and then the missionaries were 20 years later, and it's 20 years later that you have stories of the Great Flood. I don't
Now,
know.
I'll give you one that you may not have heard of, but in the southwest African country of Namibia, which was once German Southwest Africa before the First World War, there are stories of a giant flying snake. And this giant flying snake is supposed to have a light in the middle of its forehead. And it fascinates me that this is in exactly the same place which was colonized for years by German missionaries. And there are stories from parts of Germany of dragons with a light in the middle of their forehead. And I wonder how much sightings of a giant python or something then got coloured by the fairy stories that the children of the local tribes had been told by the missionaries in the mission schools.
Well,
And I think it would be very, 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 very unwise to discount that.
I agree, and this takes us back to the original Star Trek, not these pale imitations. The original 1960s, when they land on this one planet, and a previous Federation ship a century before had left them a book about the gangs and gangsters of old Chicago, and the whole society patterned itself after the gangs and gangsters of the 1930s on this world hundreds of light years away.
I don't
Eh,
remember that.
oh,
And I thought I knew all the Star Treks reasonably well.
yeah,
I'm gonna have to go and look that one up. I've got the box set. I'm gonna have to go and watch it again.
I think it was called A Piece of the Action.
I don't know if you've ever read, there's a famous book written around about the time I was born, so 1958, 59, called A Canticle for Leibovitch, which is a science fiction story set in the days after the human race has managed to completely blow itself up with atom bombs and then is beginning to come out of the new dark ages, and how somebody discovered some blueprints signed. There were blueprints of some piece of electrical engineering signed by an engineer called Leibovitch, and they thought that he was a saint. And then for centuries, they carried on copying and adding to and illuminating all these manuscripts that were based on these bits of electrical engineering that the blueprints had survived the Holocaust, which had destroyed the human race. And that again, it's like your Star Trek
Episode.
episode, your Star Trek gangsters. It's they take something completely out of context and build a whole belief system around it. And if you think about that sort of thing as a cultural concept, that's quite frightening, really.
Well,
How people could quite easily take something completely out of context and build a whole belief system around it.
well, there was a movie in the early '80s called "The Gods Must Be Crazy," and there was a guy flying in an open cockpit airplane in Africa, and he finished his bottle of Coca-Cola and he threw it out the cockpit, and it lands in the Kalahari Desert, and some Songkung people find it, and it's so alien to their culture that that like the hunter who finds it takes it back to the village, and everybody wants it because it's new, and then there's all this conflict that did not exist before, and so he's sent on a holy mission to take it outside of their culture and return it back to civilization, and is
Mhm.
his journey to get rid of the Coca-Cola bottle.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. That I'm going to have to look up. Nico's just said that they did a similar story with the Roman Empire in Star Trek and the Old
The Old
West in
West in Star.
Star
Uh-huh.
Trek Enterprise.
Exactly. The Roman Empire Star Trek was where they're again out at the outer edges of the galaxy, and they find a world that uh, developed independently as the Roman Empire instead of patterning itself on Earth's. They basically the land masses look different than Earth, but they had the same percentage of water to land and so on, and so they developed their own Romans, uh, and they were not overthrown when our real Earth's Roman Empire was. As a matter of fact, they suppressed Christianity in that other Rome, and that allowed their civilization to continue.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, Gene Roddenberry really was quite a visionary, especially in that first series, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's quite under underappreciated as a thinker and like I say, a visionary. He came up with some absolutely fantastic concepts.
Mm-hmm. He
Oh, I
did.
love it. I love having conversations like this. You realize we've gone from a ghost town in Alaska to Star Trek by way of Coca-Cola bottles. This is wonderful.
Well, and that's the way the real world is.
Mhm.
I noticed, and I'm sure you have too, that again, COVID as a marker. Before COVID, I had done some of my own podcasting, and I dropped it for because I didn't have the time, and I just started creating my own podcast again in the last couple of months. And one of the things pre-COVID was, if you're going to do a podcast with somebody, you sent them a series of questions first, and you got from them what book, TV show, or whatever do they want to hawk, and have you help them promote. And woe betide if you actually change the itinerary and what you're talking about and surprise them with questions. And it was a lot more structured than it is today, which is, yeah, what are you guys interested in talking about? Anything you really special want to talk about? Okay, we'll see if we can get to it. And then you just take the conversation where it goes. And I like that better.
Yes, so do I. I think it's both stimulating. It's stimulating and interesting both for the people doing the talking, and I very much hope for you guys out there listening and watching this. I hope you're finding this as fascinating as I am.
Yeah, me too. I admit I did a podcast with somebody. It was my producer Beth and I, and this person who's an actor producer, and his wife who's a co-produces with him, and we actually spent over an hour just talking about how are things going. Hey Bob, how are you? I'm fine. How are you, Tom? How are the kids? When does school start? And so when I hear that podcast, it's not going to be talking too much about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey movie. I'm so But we,
that's
but
just the way it goes, isn't it?
yeah, but we are human beings behind the camera, and I don't live 24 hours a day. I don't live Bigfoot 24 hours a day. I don't live ghosts and haunted houses 24 hours a day. And so I think people in the listening or viewing audience can maybe not feel so bad about their lives, that like you all have real jobs, and Vivian and you have jobs or had jobs that you had to accumulate enough money to support this, which is a hobby that most of the time does not pay for itself. And that's partly what makes us who we are too.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, my job was and is in the music business, so really it doesn't count as a proper job. It's hanging around in bars talking to celebrities, but it's
Hmm.
still better than having a proper job.
Yeah.
Going back to Bigfoot before we
Okay.
get sidetracked even further, what do you think? Now, this is the big $50 million question. What do you think is Bigfoot? What do you think Bigfoot is?
I'm still straddling the fence. It may well be that Bigfoot is some kind of memory myth. Maybe in Sri Lanka, it's a memory myth, maybe. But it may well be in British Columbia, Bigfoot really does exist. It may well be that, like in Tibet, in the Himalayas, there are now a whole bunch of cryptozoologists that think the Yeti does exist, but it's not a primate. It's actually a kind of a bear that has adapted to high elevation and in extreme cold. So so I don't think that a Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, if you were going to get the DNA testing, I don't think you could match that to every single Bigfoot sighting around the world. So that is what I think Bigfoot is not. I think
No,
that I think that a lot of Bigfoot traditions are some kind of ancient race memory passed down from person to person. So I think in some areas where people actively believe in Bigfoot, Bigfoot doesn't exist, but it used to. I think in other places, legends about Bigfoot also explain the unexplainable. Why do people go out into the woods and disappear? Where you have cultures where people don't believe in don't believe in natural death, where people we're not programmed to born, grow up, grow old, and die naturally. That if somebody dies, if it's not obviously from a natural cause, like being shot or falling down a cliff, that it has magical influences. That some people believe that none of us are meant to actually die. So maybe Bigfoot explains mysterious, unexplained deaths, missing children, missing people, which I do believe that here in North America that there was some kind of a primate that that was here in North America, especially. Where is it now? I don't know. What exactly is it descended from? I don't know. So I actually answered no to most of your question, didn't I? I'm sorry.
no, you didn't. You just very deftly sat on the fence, straddling both sides of it, which is basically where any intelligent man is going to be because there's so much room for speculation and not much room for fact there.
Yeah, because we don't have a body. We don't have good genetics. Um, we don't have fossils. That's the other thing is why are there not if there were many more Bigfoot, especially at the end of the last ice age, how come we don't have fossilized bones of big apes? A lot of people believe that Bigfoot is a what's called a Gigantopithecus,
Mm.
and which is known from the fossils in Asia, mostly jawbone, lower jawbone.
Very few,
Uh,
and very few. It's only, I think, there's lots of teeth and about
mm,
half a dozen jawbones, and that's it.
yeah, and so again, how come in over time, over millions of years, the other fossils have been ground up or what have you? So why don't we have even one somewhere here in North America coming out of geologic layers? Maybe
Some
because nobody's actually looking for it. I think that's a possibility.
That's a very big possibility. The other thing is as well that everyone should remember that there is one thing that every man, woman, and child. Hang on, where's he gone? There he is.
I
You
am.
just glitched out then for a second. That every man, woman, and child on this planet has got in common is that we're all descended from a small group, maybe 100,000 small, hairy blokes who lived on the plains of East Africa about 5 million years ago.
Hmm.
And that there were things that our remote ancestors on the plains of East Africa would have been terrified of. They'd have been terrified of the giant snakes and the giant lizards that would come in the night and take their children. They'd be frightened
Hmm.
of their much larger relatives, the larger apes and the giant baboons that we know still exist, that we know did exist there.
Hmm.
And they would be terrified of the big cats and the wild dogs and all the other creatures. And if you think of it, all of these are things which fits into what my friend and colleague Richard Freeman calls a global template of monsters. They are things which are in every different culture on Earth's collection of
Hmm.
monsters.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that some of these are what Carl Sagan called fossil memories, that because there were the things which terrified our remote ancestors so much that somewhere deep inside our brains there's the fossil memories of those things.
And I know I'm going to revert to television and movies as an analogy for this. Do you remember the 1960s movie Quatermass in the Pit,
Oh golly, of course I do.
where
Fantastic.
modern humans are descendants of a Martian colonization attempt on the Earth, and they carry that race memory of being three-legged grasshoppers.
I love those movies. I think Quatermass 2 was probably my favorite, but I like all of them.
Yeah, and the thing about Quatermass in the Pit is that it's the decades. It has not stood the test of time, decade wise. But Quatermass 1 and 2, you can still see because it was very much hard science based. The whole rocket group and everything like that, and what can happen if you send an astronaut into space and encounters radiation. These are still active questions as opposed to
Mm.
three giant three-legged grasshopper-like critters.
Well, I do hope that if they do send a man to space and that he encounters radiation, he does turn into a giant cabbage that ends up in the dome of St Paul's Cathedral. It'd be really good if that did happen.
Stranger things have happened, I'm sure.
Once again, we've gone off onto yet another tangent.
Yeah,
Have
but
you ever had a Bigfoot encounter of your own?
no, no, I have not. And it's just like you talk to somebody about seeing a ghost, an apparition. everyone's a skeptic until it happens to them, and then people become unified in their opinion. And so, also mathematically, when I write books on the paranormal, I spend a lot of time purposely visiting haunted locations. I do the research, I talk to the property owners, I come out with gizmos, and um, one time out of 20, I get anomalies I can't explain. When I was working for the Forest Service, um, sadly for the cryptozoology end, I was there for a job. I was getting paid to find archaeology, Native American campsites, miners' camps, things like that. So my intent was mostly on the job, and all too often when people have, notice their Bigfoot encounters, they're out there for a purpose, but they were not actually out there Bigfoot hunting. It just happens.
Mm.
And then it's only when you purposely go out there specifically looking for Bigfoot that you gather more evidence, because your focus is now like that instead of it's the job. I'm When I was doing archaeology, I spent a lot of time looking at the ground, looking looking for arrowheads and such,
Mm.
not up and around.
That makes perfect sense. I found the, like you say, the strange things that happen to you, the things that are inexplicable. It's like my mother always used to say, you don't fall in love when you go looking for a girl. I think this stuff happens when you're expecting to do something completely different.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
happens almost
Mhm.
by accident.
Yeah, and you actually oddly are open to this, perceiving this new opportunity, because that's one of the in business. I didn't take too many business school classes, which may explain why my bank account is so small. But somebody, like a guy who was a really successful businessman, I can't remember what exactly, he owned like five or six businesses, same business. He had five or six outlets retail wise. And he said the ultimately the trick and the secret to becoming successful in business is threefold. One of it is, um, you actually witness and perceive the value of an experience. Like you're walking down the street, and or you're hiking in the woods, and you see what looks like a vein of gold eroding out of the cut bank. So you see something and you recognize the potential value. Two, you actually decide to capitalize on it. And three, you actually have the technical skill to make something of it. You need
Mm.
one or two of these are sort of okay, but the most successful people have all three opportunities. And I think the cryptozoology, biology, and archaeology are all the same things. And if you want to measure success or becoming successful, is you have to be on the lookout for an opportunity. You have to kind of know what to do when it presents itself, and three, you need training in how to do that. You know, PhDs in archaeology, very few people. Richard Leakey and Louis Leakey, they were not. It's my understanding they didn't actually get PhDs in 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 human origins and archaeology. Richard Leakey, because he grew up on dig sites with his dad, and Louis Leakey, among other things, because he was doing paleontology before there were too many colleges passing out degrees.
Mm.
And so this is where people are self-taught, which is good. Many more people are better historians, better archaeologists, better paleontologists, because they have passion for it, rather than people who go to the school, which tells them not just what to look for, but what not to look for. where you develop a paradigm that this doesn't exist. I know you've encountered people who laugh in your face when you say, I'm doing a video podcast on the odd and unusual, and like laugh in your
Yeah,
face
sure.
and say you're superstitious or an idiot. They're a bunch of
Well, I
wagons.
am a superstitious idiot, but apart from that,
Well, at least you recognize that, and that allows you to capitalize on the opportunities. And I have to say the same. I mean, I don't, I don't do archaeology for a living now, among other things, because I talk on shows like this, and so would hold a second. I'm not sure if you could hear that, but somebody came by on a motorcycle.
yes,
Anyway,
it sounded like they were going round and round and round you for a moment.
yeah. So, uh, but I have found that pursuing the odd and unusual, yeah, if somebody has a piece of land that they want to develop for to put in a golf course or something like that, they're gonna think twice before hiring me to do the archaeology work because I write all these weird books. Oddly enough, though, I turned in a 30 plus year career in the U.S. military, and I still maintained a top secret clearance uh, after writing the books and doing television shows and things like that. So the Army
Now
was not as judgmental as the
no,
average industrialist.
that doesn't surprise me at all. I come from a military family, and that doesn't surprise me at all.
Since you come from a military family, as you know, talk to some of your family members who were deployed, were in this or that war. They make sure there's nobody around but family members when they say, "You'll never believe I'm going to tell you about this story that happened in the trenches," and the weird things that defy defy mundane explanations. And
I think part of that is that because when people are in a battle, when they are soldiers in action, they have a heightened level of what's the word? A heightened level of awareness.
mm-hmm.
And they're going to be terrified. Because my dad always said, show me somebody. My dad was a radio operator on the Battle of the Atlantic and got torpedoed twice. And he
uh,
said, show me anybody who tells me they weren't scared, and I'll show you a fucking liar.
liar.
Because that's just complete nonsense. Of course you're scared. But that level of terror gives you a heightened awareness, which I think opens you up to more what Colin Wilson called peak experiences. I think you get opened up to these experiences far more than you would do if you spent your day working as a bank clerk.
For some people, not all, but for some people, when you're hyper vigilant, hyper aware, it's because you need all this sensory input to keep you from dying. Right?
Yeah,
You need to pay attention to everything. Everything comes at you as stimulus. You can't ignore it. Otherwise, that thing could be that innocuous thing or event could kill you. So for a lot of people, that breaks down the barriers of the paradigm of this can't exist. There's no such thing as UFOs. There's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as I'm in a trench. Well, like in Iraq, the ziggurats where we had allied U.S. UK soldiers bivouacked adjacent to ziggurats in ancient Babylonian and ancient Sumerian
mm,
ziggurats, and the weird experiences happen. You can't ignore that, because if you do, you could die. But you know what? Another half of this is people absorb all this and they get so scared, then they actually lie to themselves or they panic, and the fear kills them.
Mm.
It depends on the individual.
I think this is all part of the human experience. It's all part of what makes us human.
I agree. And you know, God bless all of the people who are not satisfied with their everyday lives, that they don't just believe what the newspaper tells them, or regardless of your political leanings, that they still question and they look for answers that to weird questions. I'm not talking about solving politics, solving this or that, but why is this? Why are clouds fluffy? Why we are not the only, the possibility that now is becoming proven that Homo sapiens sapiens were not the only the only hominid to make it until only about 10, 20,000 years ago. We have all these cousins
Yeah.
that our modern or our ancient ancestors interbred with, creating. We're hybrids of Denisovans and Heidelbergensis and Homo floresiensis, probably, and Denisovans.
Yeah, and the
And
new ones they discovered in on the Philippines, Homo luzonensis.
yeah, floriensis. So I've heard them called floriensis too. But yeah,
Floriensis are the ones on Flores. Luzonensis are different, closely
okay,
related, but are different. They're the latest to be discovered. They were only
okay,
discovered about 5, 6 years ago, and that
okay.
was on in the Philippines. And the word is that there's two species now that have been discovered from China that haven't been described yet.
Interesting. See,
So
isn't
we
this
are a complete mongrel mix of different hominins.
isn't and you know what? That's wonderful to conceive of. It's it's a lot different than being a homogeneous. Yeah, and it also, the thought of, well, our ancestors wiped out everybody else. Well, not quite. Still surviving as part of us. Have you had you determined your Neanderthal DNA?
I've had my there's a story actually. My great grandfather was the first person to the British entrepreneur who brought Buffalo Bill's Wild West show to London
Oh,
in the
cool.
1880s, 1890s. And there was a long, he then divorced his wife, saying that his wife had had an affair with one of the Native American chiefs who'd come over with the Wild West show. And there'd been a story in my family going back 120, 130, 40 years, saying that me and my cousin and my father were all directly descended from the Native American chief. So we did have, my cousin Penny and I had our DNA done a few years ago, and it's all complete nonsense.
Ah,
My bloodline is all either my bloodline's all English, Irish, or German.
well,
But we
I
did
did.
try. I did look for.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Well, I did one of the genetic testings, and I come up with, I think it's about 1.8% Neanderthal DNA, which is actually quite high. I think, and this shifts as more and more people and populations have the genetic testing done. But I think people in Corsica, or as the people in Malta, which are, semi-isolated, like local
mhm.
peoples, have a very high percentage, maybe as much as 2.5% Neanderthal DNA.
Good Lord, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the Denisovan, was it the Denisovan folk, Australian Aborigines, have a high percentage of another one of our cousins in there, so that the population that emigrated to the Australian subcontinent, about 40,000 years ago, uh, were kind of, again, I think Denisovan descendants. And not 100%. When I say high, I'm thinking like 5%, something like that.
That's absolutely fantastic. I didn't know that.
And now when I start speaking with authority, I have to like go back and make sure I'm not giving you hooey.
I have just noticed something.
We're going over on time.
We have been talking for an hour and a half. How the hell did that happen?
You're just
Where did the
scintillating the
last hour and a
conversation.
half go? Where did it go? Because it feels like we've only been talking for about 20 minutes. We've been talking for an hour and a half, and we've got to go.
Well, and that's because we got rid of Vivian, and the conversation took off. But
I'll tell her you said that.
Well, she's probably watching somewhere. But back to, I just very quickly Googled, according to, they don't have a percentage, but Aboriginal Australians carry a small percentage of Denisovan DNA, indicating their ancestors interbred with Denisovans. Humma, humma, humma. So there we go.
Which makes an awful lot of sense. It makes far more sense than the idea of us all being, like you say, one homogeneous human species.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So if nothing else, if folks have the money, it's kind of an interesting question to find out the answer to. For some people, though, it unfortunately it confirms that no, you are British, not part Native American, but and I do know some people who got results where their father was not really their father, but it's kind of interesting. I know a number of Americans who have like want to be Vikings to the point where they say, "See, I have 1% Scandinavian DNA. I am a Viking." But
no, you're not a Viking. Your great grandfather probably had an affair with a woman from Stockholm.
yeah. All right, but you were starting to say bye when I came at you with these bits of trivia, so
I like trivia. This is the way I live my life by this, and I'm one of the few people I've been a professional cryptozoologist for 30 years now. And this is apart from hanging around in bars with old rock stars, is what I do for a living. So please, Jeff, come back on the show again. And I'd like to have you on my show as well. So
sure.
I will get your contact details from Vivian when she bothers
Absolutely.
to turn back up on the show. And if you're listening to this, Vivian, we had a great time without you, so nah. And all I can do now is say bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, Jeff. Thank you very much. And I've enjoyed myself massively. And I'll see
pleasure
you
too.
again very soon.
All right. Well, one last plug. If you want to see my stuff, my website is jeffdavisghostguy.com. Got that out.
Golly, I should have asked that. It shows really how unprofessional I am. Sorry, Jeff.
But
we'll do it again.
This is the nice thing about just chatting with a friend.
Bye-bye, my dear. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Time to go home. Time to go home from your simply spooky adrenaline ride. Time to go home. Time to go home. Even if you're terrified. Goodbye. Time to go home. Time to go home. Vivian and her weird friends are all going home. Time to go home. Time to go home. Vivian is waving goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye.